Hi, I'm Daniel Butler. Welcome to another edition of America's Dumbest Criminals.
On this episode of America's Dumbest Criminals, a couple of kids have a counterfeit. A man enjoys his room with a view. Cops play a little follow the loser.
I just took zeros and pasted on a $1 bill.
A woman shares her arts and crafts secrets.
You're good.
All this and more coming up on America's Dumbest Criminals.
Stop or I'll shoot! Bang!
Here's your host, Daniel Butler.
When most of us think of getting away from it all, we think of drinking Mai Tais on some remote tropical island or taking a cruise around the world. Or perhaps setting up a hammock in a communications tower about 300 feet off the ground. This is exactly why you are told to read the fine print of any budget vacation package. This guy did get a room with a view, but his hammock was quickly traded in for bunk beds and bars on his window. However, the exercise yard is a great place to meet people. Some kids think that they can get away with anything and that they're smarter than the adults who supervise them. That isn't always the case. A rebellious runt in St. Paul decided that he would take a little joyride in a stolen car. Officers chased him for quite a ways until he pulled over and jumped out of the vehicle. The officer doubted that he could catch the kid and decided to try something on a whim.
Stop! Stop or I'll shoot! Bang!
Oh man, stop shooting, man.
The officer tried his best not to shoot off his mouth to the kid again as they took a little joyride to the station in his cruiser. Officers Pace and Diaz were called in on an armed robbery which had just taken place at a local gas station. Since the thief had just left the scene of the crime and a very detailed description of the thief and his motorcycle was given, it wasn't hard for the police to spot him. As they suspected, he had headed for the freeway.
So I just, give it the gas, and I catch up to this motorcycle, and it's just, the description is a black jacket and black helmet, and then I light him up with the lights for a stop, and that's when he just takes off.
The foolish fugitive gets off the freeway and, hoping to lose Diaz, hops the curb, but he doesn't make it.
At that time, we stopped right there where the bike is. There's money flying everywhere, and there's a ski mask on the ground, and I'm thinking, hey, this looks like the right guy. We chased this guy on the freeway, around this one tree, and finally we end up jumping him and getting on top of him, and that's where I asked Steve here to go ahead and bring the witness.
We get the clerk, I bring him on down. On the way down there, I'm telling him, hey, this may or may not be the guy, take your time, just take a good look at him. And they pull the guy, the crook out of the Officer Diaz's car and set him there. I light him up with my spotlight, and the clerk tells me, he just kind of drops his head and says, yeah, we were in on it together. He says, that's my friend. Pat searched him down. He had a big roll of 20s in his pocket, which was part of the theft as well.
And he picked up the phone, called 911. As soon as his friend left.
The guy still must have been in the driveway when he was picking up the phone because it was that quick.
I'm sure his buddy was a little upset. They're probably not even friends anymore.
The police are on your tail. No matter what, you can't lose them. Where does a genius in the getaway car go? It started with a bank robbery in Durham, North Carolina, with police in hot pursuit.
In and out for 31, the pursuit is still continuing. We're coming back out to Circle J Ranch Road. Green Camaro 3, Victor Echo Papa 744.
When it looked like he was about to be caught, our dumb driver turned into a precinct parking garage.
Now for 31, he's now entering the underground parking structure number B.
Even if he hadn't robbed the bank, he would have been ticketed for illegal parking and operating heavy machinery without his brain.
I want to
Put your hands in the air! Stick them out the window, both hands! Don't move!
You have the right to remain seated.
And now, Crimes of the Week with Daniel Butler and Beaumont Bacon.
I'm Daniel Butler, and this is Beaumont Bacon, or we call her Buttercup.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Daniel.
You're blooming.
Hi, Daniel.
A couple in Montgomery, Alabama didn't think that anything was wrong when their dog began barking around 2 a.m. until they woke up the next morning and found a burglar asleep on the floor in their spare bedroom, surrounded by many of their personal belongings. Well, after police arrived, they found out that the man had been drinking heavily and broke in through a window, claiming that he was in his house.
Now, if those other people would only move, it would be his house.
They would. Well, they did. They moved him into his own cell a few minutes later.
Well, the guy in my next story also had a very rude awakening. The Colorado resident was found wandering the side of the highway holding a live diamondback rattlesnake at arm's length.
Oh, just taking him for a walk.
Well, like there's any other way to hold a live diamondback rattlesnake. It's a little boa thing there. He claimed he had been bitten while walking down the highway. But upon further questioning, the man broke down and admitted to having driven his car off the road and into a huge ravine.
I take it this man was not stone cold sober.
No, more like stone cold stupid. When the car stopped rolling, he crawled out and hoped to get some distance between himself and the car. You see, he'd already been arrested once before on a DUI. He got about 500 yards away, and he decided that he would just go to sleep and sleep off that buzz he had. Wow. Unfortunately, he was not alone, and upon wakening, he rolled right into a rattlesnake.
Whoa, talk about waking up on the wrong side of the bed. Ouch. Well, that brings us to the Vidiot of the week. From all the stories we've received this week, every one of them, this is our favorite. A retired court clerk in New York City attempted to open up a charge account using a $1 million bill. The problem is, there is no such thing.
Ma'am, where did you get $1 million banknote from?
I made it.
Well, you can't be share your secret.
Oh, I just took zeros and pasted it on a $1 bill and then ran it through a color copier.
Ma'am, you made 194 more bills as well, if I understand.
It's a hobby.
Ma'am, are you aware that the U.S. government does not make $1 million banknotes? Furthermore, it is illegal to make your own money.
Your Honor, I think in this case it is legal.
You're guilty.
The clueless crook was convicted of fraud and quickly lost her instant millionaire status.
Where's Ed McMahon when you need him?
He's
showing up with flowers?
He's doing a sitcom.
And a oh, he is?
Yeah, with Tom Arnold.
Good for Ed.
Beats going door to door. In all the stories that I've heard, none have been more bizarre than the following. A prisoner at a Mississippi jail slipped out of the kitchen door one Saturday night to go see his girlfriend. His plan was foolproof. All he had to do was jam the door open with paper, and he could slip back in unnoticed without risking his upcoming parole. That may have worked if the wardens hadn't found the paper and blocked his return route.
Hey, guys, let me in. Come on. You want to get in?
Well, he went back to his girlfriend and called the prison himself. Hello? Yeah, is this the warden? Hey, Ward, you're not going to believe this, but I can't get back in. No. And actually, they were more than happy to oblige him. Research has recently proven that taking a quick cat nap during a long workday can produce a variety of positive physical and psychological benefits to many workaholics. This dumb criminal decided to test that theory. Officers in Dallas arrived at a residence that had been recently burglarized. The distraught woman had no idea who might have done such a thing. The officer happened to notice a van parked on the street in front of her neighbor's house and asked the woman if she recognized it. She said no. The officers went over to the van and found the driver sound asleep at the wheel. They also noticed many of the household items all around him. He had evidently worn himself out robbing the house and fell asleep before he could drive away. However, the nap did refresh him, and he had all the energy he needed to fill out his paperwork down at the station, with just enough zip left over to get into the top bunk of his cell.
Coming up on America's Dumbest Criminal, cops follow a trail to the Sugar Shack.
What do you think?
Looks like sugar to me.
Give me the money. Get down. Give it all. Get down. Give it all. Get down. Get down. Get down. Get down.
Three Stooges bungle a burglary. A couple of kids have a counterfeit.
Why don't you come on out? Step outside.
Can the man sleep?
No.
A cop checks out a trunk full of trouble. More on the way after the break.
We didn't do anything. We're innocent. It's your fault.
Go back to the couch and assume the position.
Police responded to a rather unusual call of a convenience store holdup. It was an armed robbery, and 2 suspects had been shot, apparently by each other. Sources revealed that 3 teenagers suddenly pulled out guns and told the cashier to hit the ground. He was not going to argue.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Get down. Give it all. Get down. Give it all.
Then he heard 2 shots. Somehow, the armed eggheads had managed to shoot each other. Both were hit in the right leg and the second in the hands as well. Bleeding and cursing their good aim, they grabbed money from the register and fled. About an hour later, police received a call from the local hospital saying the 2 teens had been brought in with bullet wounds, allegedly from a drive-by shooting. Needless to say, Scary, Hurley, and Bo were quickly arrested and put in separate cells so they couldn't do any further damage to each other while waiting for their trial. Everyone knows you should stay away from the powdered white substance that was stolen in this next segment, but some people are powerless in its grip. It's a popular water-soluble compound whose street name is sugar. This detective and his partner on the Athens, Georgia Police Department were investigating a break-in at a local elementary school's lunchroom when they found the sweetest clue in the history of the job.
What do you think?
Looks like sugar to me.
Looks like sugar to me.
A 50-pound bag of sugar was missing from the cafeteria, but the police felt confident that they were equal to the task of catching the culprits and didn't think they'd have to search sweet and low for them.
Know something? You got the right to remain hyper.
We didn't do anything. We're innocent. It's your fault.
Yes, you can catch more flies with honey, especially if the flies stole the honey. So, you think you're going to get away, do you? Would you believe I'm sending in a SWAT team to get you? Would you believe I'm sending in a backup unit to get you? Would you believe I'm sending in my partner to get you? Would you believe I'm sending in my dog to get you?
Come on out. Our dog's here. He's going to bite you. You better come out now. Keep your hands out in front of you. Just don't take the dogs on you, man.
Would you believe you're one of America's dumbest criminals? Officer Pat Worrell tells us of an introduction to rudeness resulting in an arrest for stupidity. He was caught behind a driver stopped in the middle of the traffic lane at a shopping mall. The man was carrying on a conversation with his girlfriend in the car ahead. Officer Worrell and his friend waited a few moments before letting the driver know he was holding up traffic.
Finally, my friend honked his horn at him, and the guy turned around and told us where we could stick that horn, and that he was gonna hurt us if we didn't just leave him alone. And so I just got out of the car and I started walking up towards him and was going to have a discussion with what is your problem. And just as I'm getting there, he reaches up over the sun visor and pulls out a big long hunting knife, you know, and he's hanging out the window saying, "You want some of this? Come on, get this, get this." So I just reached under my shirt and pulled out my off-duty weapon and told him, I said, "You know, you better put that knife away because you done brought a knife to a gunfight." He looked at my gun and he looked at his knife and then he looked at his knife and my gun, and finally he put it away, and I told him, "Look, you're under arrest." I identified myself and arrested him.
Since he was off duty, Officer Worrell told the arresting officer to take his prisoner down to the station and cuff him outside the captain's bench. He went home, changed, and then headed back to the station to book the bozo. However,
when I got there, I asked the captain, because the bench was empty, you know, "Where's my prisoner?" And he told me that they had taken him back to narcotics. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, when the other officer was inventorying the car, they found these 3 pills in the glove box, and they asked this kid what it was, and he told him it was mescaline."
Evidently, the prisoner had boasted about how he had just gotten a great deal on some mescaline and was very irate that the officers had taken the 3 pills from his car. A narcotics expert analyzed them, then went back to the prisoner and made a rather unusual proposition.
And he says, "Well, I'll tell you what I want you to do." He says, "You take this pill, I'm going to give it back to you. and you take it home and you put it in a glass of milk, and it makes a very, very nice drink. It's called chocolate milk. He had bought Nestle's Quick in a tablet. You know, so he, at least he was lucky enough not to get charged with narcotics, because all he had was Nestle's Quick.
You have the right to remain seated.
This dumb criminal takes the phrase sleeping on the job to a whole new level. An officer in Port Orchard, Washington, received a call about a man sleeping in a citizen's truck. The man woke up when the officer opened the door to question him.
Sir? What? Why don't you come on out?
For what?
Come on out, sir. Is this your truck?
Yes, it is my truck.
Why don't you come on out? Step outside.
Can't the man sleep?
No. Is that your cell phone?
Yes.
Here's a checkbook. Does this checkbook belong to you?
Yes.
You're under arrest.
Sure enough, it had the caller's name and address on the checks. The guy was arrested and put in the back of the cruiser, where he promptly fell asleep again, with visions of prison dancing in his head. Cops spend most of their time driving around looking for dumb criminals. But once in a great while, the dumb criminal finds them, as this officer found out. An off-duty police officer was sitting on the steps of his building one day, relaxing, when a guy comes up and asks him for a favor. The Slimestein didn't want spare change. He didn't want directions. What he did want was for the officer to watch for the cops while he broke into cars. The officer said, "Okay," and watched in amazement as the dunce went about his business. As soon as Beavis slid out of the car with the radio, the officer slid the cuffs on him and asked him to watch for the cops this time. After all, one favor deserves another. This next surveillance tape shows a group of kids who should have eaten their spinach before they went to work. While one person watched the door, the other two ran into the store and immediately went behind the counter to the safe and attempted to swing it over the top. However, the 500-pound safe was a little too heavy for the guys, who accidentally knocked the entire counter to the ground. They frantically grabbed the safe again and headed out to their waiting car, which is where they were caught a few minutes later. They are now safely behind bars. Well, our bungling buffet is now closing, but please join us next week as we serve up another heaping helping of hapless hoodlums here on America's Dumbest Criminals.
On the next episode of America's Dumbest Criminals, a drunk does some local landscaping.
No, I was just going to a liquor store. I was just going to get a beer.
A crook takes an unusual pit stop. A burglar dresses for success. A suspect gets the last word in court.
That was stupid.
All this and more on the next episode of America's Dumbest Criminals.
I do recall a traffic stop one time many years ago. I stopped this lady, and I think for speeding. I don't recall. It's probably been 25 years ago. And I stopped her. I went up, and she rolled her window down. And I asked for her driver's license and informed her why she had been stopped. And she had a small child with her, probably 5 or so. And that was in the days prior to everybody absolutely had to be buckled up all the time. And her son was standing on the floorboard in the back seat with his arms up over the seat, up near the window so he could hear. And I was talking to this lady and telling her what she had done and that I was going to issue a citation. And this kid come about halfway out that window and he started screaming and hollering at me, but you better leave my mommy alone or I'm going to fight you and this and that. And I finally said, look, lady, just go, but just slow down and pull him back inside. You know, it just was not worth the grief, you know, being attacked by a 5-year-old.